on, folks? I'm Matt. This is Photosynthetic, and welcome to another episode of The Hash Files. Today, I've got some really awesome guests. I got a duo here. They're known as the Homegrown Hashishin Podcast here. And guys, welcome to the show here. I'm super stoked to have you. Been hanging out with you on the Discord here a little bit lately. We've got Don't Worry Be Hashi, or Hashi as he's known, and Sonoma Sun Growing. We'll call you Sunny. How's it going, gents?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having us on.
Stoked,
Fantastic.
man.
I,
Yeah,
I feel like I feel like the energy level just went up around here with that intro, man.
Kick
I
it up
know,
a
man.
notch.
I need to be amped. I'm normally like super monotone. Like, let me go get a Red Bull real quick. And
We are bringing
uh,
the A game today, gentlemen.
Yeah,
Of
I
course,
think I
go
think
ahead,
that's the
guys.
most fired up I've heard Hashi, and we've been doing this podcast now for a full season, and I think that's the most fired up you've ever been after
let's
that intro.
go.
Let's go, let's do this.
Hash making rules everything around me.
Steven.
Wow, you guys are bringing the energy and the excitement.
I apologize, everybody. We don't know how to behave.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is our first time doing a podcast together on somebody else's podcast.
Yeah,
This is cool.
interesting.
Well,
Yeah.
I met you guys, got invited to the Discord once again. We'll drop his name, Hash Ricky, if you know him on Instagram. A bunch of us know him
Yeah.
as Woody Wilson. He kind of hooks me up with everybody for this show, so got to show him the love. But of course, you guys have it's now the Homegrown Hashishin Society Discord, if I'm not mistaken, and it used to be known as the Don't Worry Be Hash. This is something you guys put together. You've got a podcast that looks like it's come out of it, but why don't you guys, let's give me some background. Let's talk to people about how you guys met, how you came together, and this Discord and the podcast. Just give me the life story in 10 minutes or less.
For sure. Well, I live in Missouri. I previously lived in Denver and wanted to start growing and immediately making hash whenever I moved back here. Didn't have any kind of mentors or anything. Found a lot of people try and keep technique to their chest as I would go and ask people questions on Reddit or Instagram. Not many people would give answers. People were trying to sell me $1,000 clones that did 5% or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was just like, man, this is going to be a harder journey than I thought. So I researched so many different sources, talked to as many people as I could, and just kind of took all that information and started making my own posts on Reddit and Instagram, and kind of set a goal of like, I'm just going to post every day, something educational, whatever I'm learning, things I'm experimenting with. And then that kind of grew. So then I made the Discord channel and just called it Don't Worry Be Hashy up until recently. And then Sonny, I don't know how you got invited. Did you find me on Reddit or Instagram or?
Someone else invited me, and I don't even remember who, to be honest with you. I just
Nice.
I just appeared one day. It
Yeah,
was kind
I
of out
love
of
to hear
nowhere.
that. Yeah, we're up to like 750 plus hash makers now. And
It's
I
amazing.
I invited probably like the first 150 or so just through Reddit and Instagram. And then everyone's really kind of built the community themselves. So I've always tried to do fun things like monthly giveaways, and there's some Patreon subscription tiers for various benefits and stuff like that. But with the podcast and how much the server had grown, I kind of came to Sonny and was like, I don't really feel right using this as a platform to promote my own personal brand, because it kind of feels like, I'm the customer service rep for the Discord then at that point, and I already have a group of mods that we've put together to vote on things democratically. So we just recently renamed it to Homegrown Hashishin Society. So it's kind of a supplemental component to the podcast, because a lot of people are coming to the server, coming to me on Instagram for invites from the podcast. So um
I
so
kind of
yeah.
look at I look at this the opposite way. I think the podcast is a companion piece to the Discord. You
Well, I
know,
guess technically in terms of order of events, but I'll pass it off to you to talk about how the podcast came to be.
yeah. Well, I mean, I guess back to the beginning. I started growing myself in a closet in like a cabinet grow in the late 2000s out here in California. I grew up in the Midwest, but been out here for like 20 years. And anyway, I grew indoors for years, and then finally I've moved up to Sonoma County, and I've got a nice plot of land and some really cool neighbors, and so I'm able to grow my legal six outside. And so I've been doing that for the last, I want to say 6 or 7 years now. And then we really got into this hash making thing, that rabbit hole has happened really over the last 2 or 3 years. But in terms of the Discord, I'm like a lot of you. I listen to all like the Hashishin, and I think there's some really great things about that podcast. That they talk with pros, and I think that from an aspirational point, that's really cool. I think you can mine some really great details out of there, but nothing was really geared to the home hash maker and like taking down that gatekeeping. And then I just had the idea of, God, it'd be fun to do something around this idea, and I had the idea of the name for the podcast. And I just put it out on the server one day, and then Hashi's like, dude, I've been wanting to do the same damn thing. And so we just got to talking about it. And
Yeah, just worked
yeah,
out.
and I think pretty quickly the thing just came together. It's like, well, let's just figure it out. So like really honestly, we've gotten to know each other during the course of recording this thing. And I think that's been really fucking awesome because we've come at this thing from completely different directions. We have different reasons for being in it. We have different like ways that we grow. We have completely different backgrounds, but we have this common thread in hash making that we can somehow get on with a stranger and talk for 3 fucking hours. And so I think it's a really cool thing. And to me, I look forward to recording them. That's the
Yeah.
best part is
A
I get
kindred souls kind of thing. I mean, you guys just both have a passion for the hash, and everybody loves and doing it and learning about it. So it's not hard to see how that sort of friendship will blossom, and then in turn the podcast. So then, talking about the podcast, you guys have quite a few episodes now. You said your first season's. Are you sort of in the books with the first season? Where does that go? And any new guests coming up soon that you want to talk about?
I'm behind on editing right now.
Uh,
I've got 4 episodes left to publish for season 1 here. We've got Mo Buddy coming out next, then Can of Plates. I think he might be our first guest from Canada, and then we
oh,
got to
nice.
get
Yeah,
something
I think I know that
scheduled
kid.
with you for season 2 still, and then uh we got we already had the Bryantist on. Brett Bird was an awesome interview that'll be coming up, and then uh Chase with Hashi.io talking about freeze drying
Yeah,
and just kind of the data tracking side
yeah.
of
They got that
hashing.
neat app, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
his app is super cool. I met him like 3 years ago through that. Like when I first started growing, I was on Reddit every day on the like solventless channel and or rosin channel subreddit, whatever you call it. And I saw him posting looking for beta testers, and I was like, "Hey, dude, I'm just a small home grower, but I'd love to beta test the app." So we just kind of stayed in touch, and I haven't set it up yet, but I just got their latest product is called the Hashi Link, and it's a Wi-Fi responder that plugs into your harvest right. So you basically get all the data reports to their app
Sweet.
interface on your phone, which is
Mhm.
perfect for me because my freeze dryer isn't at my house and I often run it overnight. So everyone is always telling me it's a gamble, but I'm like, I don't, with my life and family situation and everything, I'm like, I got to risk it for the biscuit and just let it run overnight and go check on it the next day.
So this new version of the app is just going to have like notifications and stuff as well, or is it just data monitoring?
I'm not sure. I need to still dig into it a little bit more. But yeah, that would be the ideal thing is being able to set different triggers that fire notifications,
Right.
custom notifications and stuff. But I'm excited because it will be able to like something I talked about with Chase is as a small home grower, we end up doing, smaller batches in the freeze dryer sometimes. Like if I do a bunch of test washes, I might have 3 trays in there, but they each only have like 12 grams on them or whatever. And then separately, do bigger washes and have full trays. I'm really curious to see dry time differences from like, small load versus heavy load,
Yeah.
and just kind of see what that difference is. Because for the most part, everyone just says, oh, 18 hours and at these settings. And it's like, once again, just like a lot of the other things in this process, it's not a standard recipe. There's differences. I recently on freeze drying, this is just a funny note. Homie from the server, Secret Asian, he lives in Florida, and he kept running into this problem where his hash wasn't dry enough. And I kept talking to him about it over the course of like a couple different batches, and I was like, dude, I'm really sorry. Like, gave you all the setting recommendations. My best advice is, you just got to keep extending it. And he was like, yeah, I had a really good batch. Finally, I ended up having to freeze dry it for 24 hours. Um, and then I was like thinking about all the hurricanes and shit happening right now. And I was like, he's like right on the like 30 minutes from the beach on on the east coast of Florida. And I was like, dude, your room humidity is probably like 70% just naturally, and you're like closer to sea level and everything like that. You're at sea level. So I imagine that has a huge impact versus the setting someone in Colorado runs at a mile high and 30% outdoor humidity.
Yeah,
So
that's a very fair point. I mean, it's much like the grow room is seasonal and whatnot too. I would think that the outside weather is going to have external effects internally on your drying process, your freeze drying process, altitude, all those things. So more data, and always, always, always. Touching on the garden though for a few minutes, why don't you guys tell me a little bit about your grow styles and how you like to go about, doing things in the garden there, and
yeah, we're
talk
polar
some passion.
opposites.
Oh,
I'll let
okay.
I'll let Sonny go first. What's
Yeah.
funny?
So I do all outdoor. I do no indoor at all. I go in 30-gallon pots, but I'm incorporating now this next season. I'll be incorporating some Hugel tanks that I built.
Very
They're
cool.
like 3 by 8 by, let's see, they're 3 by 8 by 3, I believe, deep as well, tanks. And I've got invasive redwood trees in my backyard, so I can't just put it in the ground. Everything will just gets choked out by this redwood tree. But these tanks are just amazing. I grew like 14-foot tomato plants this year. It's just fucking incredible.
The
Yeah.
actual tomato plants too. I'm not joking here. So
Yeah, actual tomato plants. Yeah. So I think we're gonna grow some paradise pine in those next year and see about growing a tree, which I've never
very
done
cool.
Nice.
before. Yeah,
Yeah,
So
dude, I got
I've never
three
left.
Paradise Pine Phenos right now, and they're stretched like 6 inches from the light already.
Oh God. Yeah, it's going to be like a 15-footer. I'm going to have to put it out as late as possible. But yeah, everything I do is all organic. Everything's under the sun. I built a little IKEA keeper cabinet that sits in my dining room that I can keep cuts in, which is pretty fantastic. So, everything I've done traditionally has been from seed all the time because keeping the cuts or keeping clones just doesn't fit my life very well. But I think the server has been pretty amazing because having access to more people that are doing pheno hunts all the time, I can have like basically a guest garden and run everybody else's stuff on like proven hitters that are going to work. And I'm really excited about that going forward. But
oh yeah.
but yeah,
How
like
about
I dabbled in the KNF, Jadam, all that stuff. I've got the rotting buckets in the backyard.
Yep.
Like I'm constantly messing with that stuff. I have been watering with rain barrels, which is kind of interesting. I've got like a 1,500 gallon tank on the side of my house for
Wow.
water catchment, and was have been growing cannabis in it. But I actually had some weird stuff happen with my plants this year, and I'm wondering if there might be something with the rainwater that's not good with it. So
Yeah,
uh,
we've talked about that a little bit
TBD.
too. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'll have to see what comes of it. So all organics, KNF, Jadam, all that stinky stuff
Crunchy
that
is
I've
crunchy as
been
fuck.
there. So
Yes.
so then Hashi, you're indoors in the lab, full salt. I'm gonna take it if you're saying exact opposites.
Yeah, just being indoor, and I'm still a beginner. I've only been growing since late 2021.
Okay.
Uh so and starting out, I was just going straight for it for hash making. So I went cocoa, and I think as I continued to build my stack, I was using like between 11 and 13 products, and then realized like, man, I'm just putting a lot of money per plant into this, but I was getting fire hash and good yields quickly. So I wasn't that disappointed, but at the same time I kind of got interested in like, how can I get the same or better results with less effort, because I was just focused on mixing nutrients and maintaining pH and reses and stuff like that. And not spending as much time with the plants as a result. So then I tried grow dots, and then that led me to beanstalk, which is basically the same thing but parted out to where you can kind of control the mix a little bit more. If you're like, oh, this one needs a bit more CalMag, so I can use more of the calcium pellets as opposed to grow dots is just like a one size fits all mix. Um, and surprisingly, with a grow dots run, I placed in my first hash comp. So I was blown away, beating out living soil and stuff like that with that. And it was a pretty low effort cycle that time. I did not expect to place at all.
Shout
Fantastic.
out grow dots. Jesus.
Yeah. Well, and I think the beanstalk does much better. Like I've actually had better performance with that. Um, but I kind of am always switching back. So I started out with house and garden, then I tried all those different pellets, then I stayed with beanstalk for a while. But part of that is I have multiple grow spaces as well. So like one is my sister's illegal medical grower, and I basically just like help her with her space. That's a perfect case for beanstalk where I don't want to rely on her managing a res perfectly whenever she's not really that into the hobby, you know. um, it makes it a lot easier to just teach somebody how to pH water and just teach them how to not over and underwater, and then you got a good run. And I'll just run over and defoliate a few times throughout it and throw up the trellis before flipping to flower. And that's pretty much it as far as my effort on those. And then we just do splits, and I process for her basically and provide all the clones. So, um, so that's an example there. Right now, my grow partner and I are running BioBiz,
Okay.
and he's ran that commercially at past jobs that he's had and had great results. And commercially, they were winning awards and stuff with their flowers. So um, we're running that alongside with a bunch of other additives. I'm always kind of mixing up. I use Recharge, Great White. I was using Mammoth P for a long time. Uh, Power SI. I think the main things if you're doing like growing for hash is not just the products, but your grow style. Something I truly believe in from an indoor standpoint is like obviously outdoor, whole different ballpark.
Yeah.
Indoor, you got height limitations, and you have a very fixed lighting scenario so that your lowers and uppers are very different in terms of how much light they're getting, how mature the trichome heads become as a result of that. uh, so I'm a big fan of growing really small plants, actually. Like I used to run 9 in a 5x5. So I
Okay.
would just like
See a
flip
green
them
style.
at like 14, 16 inches, and then they grow up to like 24 to 30 inches. And that way I wasn't choked out on my light. I had better like heat management, and I could flip things through to flower faster whenever I was hunting. So I also used to just kind of like stake things off instead of trellis. I definitely don't think I was getting great biomass yields as a result, but the hash was super fire. So,
Yeah.
and I don't know, recently I've been toying with the belief that intentional stressors of overwatering and underwatering and stuff like that can actually potentially produce better trichome heads, like more resin as a response. I don't know any of the science behind it, but just judging any of the uh, comps that I've placed in have all been grows that were not great. Like it's kind of funny to me
Yeah.
how that's worked out so
Yeah,
far.
these plants react so well to stress, and just a number of factors that we do to stress them to make them produce better. So when we talk about producing, then of course, I think a lot of us, myself included, are doing this for concentrates. So tell me a little bit about when you guys decided that it wasn't just about the flower. Like, how did concentrates become the focus?
For me, it just was right from the start.
Okay.
I have an autoimmune disease that affects my lungs, and at one point, I had scar tissue in my lungs from
Ooh.
X-rays and everything. And I switched from flour to concentrates. And my personal belief, if you have some sort of lung condition, is when you're vaporizing it, it reconstitutes. Like if you look at your rig, it's got a whole bunch of resin that's collected in it. That's not all just from what pulled through. Like that's reconstituting from a vapor to a solid on the sidewalls of the rig after getting cooled down by the water. So that's happening in your lungs too. So I was like, man, I'm just going to do a bunch of dabs and coat this whatever's in my lungs, because initially they said they thought it was lymphoma. So this happened to be right whenever rec got legalized in Colorado, and I had a ski vacation planned. So I literally was in Denver 2 days after rec legalized and bought some of the first concentrates legally, and then
Cool.
brought back like a quarter ounce back to Missouri and was like, just this is how I'm going to treat myself. And then whenever I came back in, they did x-rays and they were like, wow, what have you been doing? Your This x-ray is clear now. um and anyways, so that's why I just stuck with concentrates, and back then it was all BHO. Found my way to rosin in Denver and was spending probably about $600 a month. I was just like, this is not realistic. Like
Yeah, not sustainable.
even if I make good money, that's just irresponsible. Like it's just too much. I either need to figure out how to smoke a lot less, or if I want to smoke more, I got to do it myself. And that was the initial goal. Now it's interesting where like my consumption is balanced way out. I think a lot of people probably go through that at first where you're like, I have so much. I can
Yes.
finally smoke as much as I possibly can. But I kind of got over that recently. And now it's more about the art and the hobby of it, and just the joy of the process and trying to get better at it. Um, but yeah, for me, it just was that from the start. I actually never grew for flower. I've never had my own drying space. Like I've put flowers in another person's cannitrol before, but literally right from the start, everything's just been chopped fresh frozen for me.
Wow, that's pretty cool, man. I don't know too many
Hmm.
girls that are actually doing taking that level of commitment. So much respect. What about you, Sonny?
Oh, I was not that, man. I was growing. But I will say this, man, I was growing some early auto flowers. That was pretty fucking cool. Back at so like lowrider, like that stuff, like the early autos that were just fucking garbage. But I had a restricted height situation, so I was trying to grow like 18-inch, 24-inch plants, which was pretty fucking wild. Anyway, fast forward years later, I had a client do design work, and the I had a client that was a making high-end BHO. At the time, they were actually doing some pretty novel things that everybody else lopped onto, but they were one of the first ones to like have carts that were a color instead of it being
Okay.
like actual distillate. And anyway, I got turned on to their to dabs from them. They were doing some like they called it full spectrum crystalline, but it's basically it was fucking BHO crystals. It was, you know what I mean? It's with
Yeah, yeah.
what we know it now, right? It's BHO. But anyway, got into that and realized like God, that this is such a better way to. I just felt better. My lungs, I had just weren't. I was coughing all the time. Like it just felt better on me, like not having all that burning matter. And honestly, like for someone that's been a long-term consumer and someone that's really into the nuance and flavor, like I could get all the nuance and flavor and stuff from that plant that I couldn't tell when there was burning matter in the way. Like I feel like have a closer relationship with the resin when the resin's all I'm having.
Hmm.
There's something about it, you know. Everything else is just in the way. So I really got into the BHO, but then of course over the next few years was working with other people and started working with farms that were starting to produce fresh frozen for rosin, and they were on the kind of the early, you know, they were some of the first ones hooking up strings of batteries and freezers and throwing them in the back of trucks and trying to get them into town and like before there were actually commercial services to do that
Right.
for these farms, but yeah, but I got into figured out how much better rosin was in terms of the cleanliness of it, and started to realize, well, shit, I can fucking make this stuff. Like, there's nothing to keep me from doing this. So then I, started to dry ice hash. I played around with that, which of course is just filthy dirty, but like really easy to make. But I made some stuff that I could smoke, and so that was better than nothing. But it still wasn't nearly what I could buy at one of the recs or at a
Yeah.
set. So I progressed along, and then just gradually over the last couple of years, really committed to spending the money on, having the right equipment and like having a proper RO system and just doing the things, kind of piecing it together, and where I can make hash. I don't have to apologize for it to anybody, and that's fucking cool. I was just at Hall of Flowers and was swapping jars with people, and people were stoked. And like that's a pretty cool feeling when or someone that's just
Dude, trading is my favorite.
the
Like
best
being at
thing.
an
The
event and hanging out
best.
with another hash maker and just being like, oh yeah, here I got a couple jars of this and you got a couple
It's the
jars of that. Let's
best.
swap.
It's the best. And yeah, and like having people stoked on it, like and seeing smoking people out on your stuff. And it's like I kind of explain to my wife, like it's a love of gardening that runs in my family, right? But it's a happy people really like getting hash a lot more than they like getting tomatoes. They
Yep.
just
Ain't that the truth?
I told my wife initially because of the money thing for me is I was like, look, here in Missouri, it goes for 70 a gram pre-tax and then it's overtaxed. And gold right now goes for $54 a gram. So I'm mining gold in our basement.
Hey, that's valid. Completely valid. I approve of that. So let's get into talking process. Let's talk basics. Let's say that I'm a new grower. I've been growing for a few months. I've got a couple grows under my belt, and I want to start hashing. I want to start making some good concentrates. New grower comes up to you guys and says, how do I start? What do I do? What do we do first? How would you guide them through the process?
Hon- Honestly, the first thing is understanding the process,
Yeah.
and it's like, and I think over understanding the process as much as possible, because you're gonna watch videos, and like the Pedro's Grow Room one is great. Like there's some really good classics out
Pedro's
there.
solid.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
an amazing video. I think everybody's watched that one. That's learned
Yeah.
hashing for the last 5 years.
I think the big thing with watching the videos that I've learned early on, because I honestly did probably 150 hours research at least before my first wash of just like wanting to understand the process, like you're saying. And there's a lot of differing opinions. So it
Oh,
becomes
of
really
course.
hard to decide how to go about it because you're like, man, there's all these different people that are doing good quality work that I want to make something like what they're making
Hmm.
and they're all telling me this is the right way. But now you have a bunch of micro decisions to make. Am I going to do a machine? Am I going to hand wash it? Do I need a cold room? Do I need to buy a freeze dryer? So the first thing I always tell people is even if you're not a grower, first off, you can start with friends trim. Even if you just got some friends that are growers, trim is a great way to start. So for me, I started growing and I was lucky enough to get gifted some like teen plants and veg that I could basically flip right away. There were still 8 weeks at least before I could wash any fresh frozen on my own. So I was like, okay, I got 8 weeks. Talked to some friends who had seeded runs where they were like, oh, this bud's all seeded. So it's not the same quality as what I would normally want to be smoking on. And, or their patients wouldn't want it. Um, and then I had friends who just had tons of trim sitting around that they had been holding on to that they were either like doing Everclear soaks with to make tinctures with it or
Yep.
whatever. And but it was just sitting around there like, yeah, I don't really care about it. So that was really great to get my hands on a bunch of material that was also low stress. Like I wasn't running splits with somebody that was hoping for a cash return in any way. They were just like, yeah,
Yeah. Just able to learn
I'm
the process.
this shit didn't is stuff I don't care about. Let's see what happens. So that's step one is, get as many washes in as you can. I think I did like 40 washes in like 3 months.
Oh
Like I
wow.
just like went ham and talked to as many different growers as I could and grew a bunch of different plants myself. So that, I mean, those are all single plant washes and not huge washes or anything like that. But That just gave me a lot. So step one to me is start with cured, especially if you're concerned about, you know, how much material you have. If you're the type of person where you're like, oh, I'm allowed to grow enough plants and I have, you know, a year's worth of flower that I'm not going to smoke, then yeah, go ahead and go for fresh frozen. Like you said, like, oh, that the dedication, like that means I went into it knowing that I washed some plants that were like sub 1%. So I took like 600 grams fresh frozen. That would have been 200 grams of cured flower, roughly. That I ended up with, you know, 5 grams of rosin or 4 grams of rosin, you know. So it's like
Oh yeah.
I didn't
Feel that.
care because I wasn't going to smoke the flower. So
Right.
it's like that's what I tell everyone too is like first off you got to start your entire plan based on your needs and like, you know, what outcome you want, how much flour do you need to smoke on, how much hash do you want, uh is it really important for you to hit high yields, or you know, are you kind of all in mentality like I'm describing? So that's kind of step one, is start with cured flour, like, you know, grow your grow, maybe even just do like a group pheno wash of or multiple plant wash of all your lowers and trim. And then that way, like whenever you're after you've dried your branches and you're going to trim everything for flower, that can just save you a lot of time, where you just basically keep all the good buds off the colas and then just buck everything off and bag that up for a wash. So,
This is the way.
uh, so that's a great way to start, because when you're dealing with cured, you don't have to worry about the room temperature as much. It's going to be more sandy, a lot easier to work with in the bag. If you've got something greasing up that's fully cured, like that's some fire ass heads in the bag in terms of meltiness and everything like that. But for the most part, cured's always going to be a lot easier to work with. You're also going to get more contaminants, so you got to be more careful about agitation and stuff like that. But it's a great stepping stone, because if you fuck it up, it's not that as big of a deal as if you were like, man, that was the entire plant. I just spent 4 months growing that between veg and flower, and now I fucked up that wash. So,
Yeah.
anyways,
So,
machine wash is super easy. You can
yeah.
spend like $150 and get a fan speed controller and
There.
decent washing machine. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
you got it right behind you. So, so that's a great entry. Honestly, I'd also tell people, dude, you can use like a spatula in a 5 gallon bucket and still make good hash. So you need a set of bags. They come in 8 bag sets, or you can also start with just like a 3 bag or 4 bag set from different brands. When you're starting out, I always tell people just start with, you know, run your 25U bag for food grade, but a lot of times I just run like 4 to 6 washes and just leave whatever's in that bag through all those washes, and then just collect it once, because it's like I don't care about the cleanliness of it, because it's all just gonna be something I make edibles with or some capsules with or whatever. So basically I run my 45 bag, 160, 220. And then that way you got your 160 to 220, which is also food grade, but then that 45 to 159. When you're starting out, just having that one bag to collect is a lot easier. I honestly still usually run 45 to 159, because I've learned at this point how to keep it really clean, and I like that more full spec high more than the 90U. Sometimes I still do separate for melt on like a first run and stuff like that. Sometimes I run more bags and then just pull those bags for the third, fourth, fifth wash or whatever, you know. But yeah, you need bags. You need at least a 5 gallon bucket and a spatula. Most bag sets come with a 15U screen that you can use when you're air drying. Uh, and
I
air
would, I would, I
drying.
would say real quick on the subject of bags though, back to that, I wouldn't even recommend buying an 8 bag set. I'd say buy 3 bags
Just to get the
and
Oh
feel.
yeah,
buy three
yeah.
good bags.
Yeah. Get that
Like
45 to
buy
159,
three,
which is
buy
20 for
buy
work.
three from Press Club TM. And but yeah, but honestly, like it's worth it to have a better like an all mesh bag. It makes things so much better than those like I think all of us started with some cheap ones. I had some like bullshit I bought off of Amazon that had rubber on the sides and stitching through it, and it was just
I
awful.
luckily never used the rubber sidewalls, but I hate those. Someone gifted me a set of Bubble Magic 20-gallon bags with the rubber sidewalls, and when they gave them to me, I was like, I'll probably never use these. And they were like, I definitely won't use these, so you just have
They,
You
you
have
know,
to take my problem.
they were great for making dry ice hash. They were great for that, but
Oh, beat
Yeah,
it up
yeah.
and
only
stuff. Yeah,
practical application.
apple hash. So I want to kind of jump back on a couple points that you touched on there, Hashi. Primarily around the fresh frozen. I found my first foray into fresh frozen a horrible failure because I did a bunch of stuff wrong. I didn't have cold enough space, all of the things. But if you had to, list just a couple of pitfalls, places where people really hit pain points from doing fresh frozen, things to watch out for, what's most important?
So speed is everything. The
Great.
analogy I always make for people is like you got to be like a NASCAR pit crew. And you mentioned at the beginning like the research aspect. I rock climb as a hobby, for example. When you're trying to do a hard route, you literally visualize the entire route. Like if it's something that you've tried multiple times and you know like this is the section that I fell at, you literally are sitting there visualizing each move before you go try it. That's what I do every time I wash. I walk through all my equipment and I literally visualize, okay, the material is soaking. I'm going to go paddle it and then I'm going to drain it into the bags. They're already set up in my collection vessel the way I want. And then I'm going to spray it and my ice water and my sprayers all ready to go. So like that's the mistake I made early on is kind of getting relaxed on that. And then I was doing a fresh
Mm.
frozen wash in high temps and then my sprayer wasn't ready. So now I'm like, fuck, now I got to put ice
Where's
water
my
in
fucking
this. And
spoon? Where's my
looking
spoon?
for this. Yeah, yeah, that. Like, oh my
Yeah.
God. So speed is everything. Have a freezer nearby to your station. Even if that means you gotta go buy a cheap deep freeze or whatever. Like you have to have a freezer if you don't have a cold room. And I refer to it specifically as a work freezer because I keep a separate freezer that I store my fresh frozen in, so it's not getting opened and closed constantly. And then I have a freezer that I work out of in terms of collecting on trays and stuff. So speed is everything. Contrary to most people's belief, I tell people all the time, you don't actually need a really cold environment. You just need to nail these different steps, basically. Like I used to have my all my grow space in the like storage area of my house, and I had like one little desk that I kept my washer and my press and everything at. So I had this tiny little space, and in the summer it would be like 80 degrees, and I would be washing in there fresh frozen at like 80 degrees. And there's some yield sacrifices and you're going to get a little bit of greasing in the bag inevitably, but I was still hitting 4.5 5% yields on stuff in those conditions. But it all comes down to some very specific processes. So first off, if you look up instructions for setting up collection vessels, a lot of people run the tote setup where you got your bucket frame with your bags and that goes into a tote, and then you either have a drain or a pump out of the tote from there. That's great if your environment's cold, but uh I use a 32-gallon trash can, and whenever my room's hot, I just put like 20 pounds of ice in the bottom of that, and then I use a pump to pump the water out instead of like dumping it by hand. And then that way I'm collecting into an ice cold environment. And then I have a drain on my collection vessel. So I kind of drain the water and intentionally keep it to where my 45U bag has the hash suspended in the ice water.
Mm.
And then with my chilling vessel, so many people use temp guns to check everything and make sure everything's good. I just over ice the fuck out of my chilling vessel. I put like 100 pounds of ice in my 40-gallon chilling vessel every time I wash, and then I just no, it's cold. So
Mhm.
then I use that same for my sprayer, which is pumped from that same vessel now. Um, Same thing, your sprayer's got to be really cold. Whenever I used to use just like a hand pump fertilizer sprayer when I first started, same thing. I would fill it 2/3 to full with ice and then less water, and then that way that ice is just like
Cold water
melting
is
off.
everything with this shit.
Yeah,
It's
and keeping the hash wet. So like after you've started to collect, I will say hand washing without a cold room is really fucking hard. You gotta have at least 2 people to do that, in my opinion, to keep the material soaked on and cold while also getting the hash out of the bags quickly. It's kind of impossible. With the machine, you can like hand wash. Like I'll use a slotted spoon, uh, like big, large slotted spoon for cooking, and hand stir the first wash in the 5 gallon washer. And then that way I can drain it. And as that's draining into the bag, as soon as it's done draining, I cap that drain and use my pump from the ice water vessel and just refill that with ice water immediately. So the material is only not on ice water for like 30 seconds. So like as soon as it's empty, I'm filling it back up. And then I'll run like a 3 minute machine wash with the fan speed controller on low. So it's like really low agitation. And when it's hot, you maybe use a little bit more ice in the vessel. There's always the debate of like, oh, iceless versus a little bit of ice versus, oh, you're using way too much ice. There is always an aspect of too much ice, but in my personal opinion, it all comes down to agitation. You could have a lot of ice in a vessel and not agitate that much and do longer wash intervals or whatever, and you're not necessarily going to bust the shit out of the material. Um so I think 3 minute wash on low, as long as the machine's relatively full, you're not going to beat anything up. And then I have that 3 minutes to spray and collect the hash from that first pull. And uh, I think that's about all you need. If you're air drying, I use a tray of some kind, paper towels, probably like 4 paper towels stacked up or so underneath a 15U screen. And then I take that scoop from the 45U, dump it onto the drying screen, and the paper towels are going to kind of wick the moisture out of that.
Moisture down,
and then I just use like a credit card, or our sponsors for our podcast, the Press Club's collection cards. I'm usually using those to collect out of the bag, and then I just kind of form that into a rectangle, and then I can kind of just organize on that 15U screen, like wash 1, 2, 3, 4. And when you're starting out, that goes back to using the single bag. Things get a lot more complicated if you try to collect 45 to 72, 73 to 90, 90 to 120, 120 to 160. I don't recommend that without a cold room, because that's just going to take
and for a beginner, like honestly, the 45 to 159 is the way to go. And like I'll just say I have no intention of doing anything else, because the full spec product I believe is better, right? Like that's without question. So I will say there is another way to go about this though, and this is one of the things where Hashi and I differ in terms of our approach, right? Like I don't use the fan speed controller, because I have a different harvesting technique where I don't cut across fan leaves. I am just only cutting off stems. That's it. So I'll leave, like if it has any trike on it at all, it's gonna stay on. And then what I'll do is do short washes that way. And I'm only washing in an ice ass cold garage. And I only wash because I'm harvesting once a year. And then I'm able to wash in November, December, January, where it's 30 degrees outside.
Yeah, completely different spectrum of you're harvesting right as it gets cold outside.
Exactly. Totally different situation, right? So it allows me to kind of like just come back and do it a little bit easier, right? But the thing is, in the end, you can end up getting really, really clean hash that way, right? But again, it all comes down to like, if you want to make something premium, you're having to make a series of decisions to what that's going to get you there, right? And if you have constraints, look, I've got hot temperatures like Hashi has to deal with in Missouri, right? Like there's going to be decisions you're going to have to make to be able to get the quality that you want out of it. If you can pick yourself a more optimum situation and you can stand to just wash in the winter months, you know what? Like might be a great way to go for a beginner anyway. If it gets cold where you went, wait and do it in the winter for the first time. Don't try washing in a hot environment the first time. Like, don't make things fucking difficult on yourself,
Yeah. The other tip I would give a beginner is a big thing I've seen people make mistakes on, even people that have been growing for a long time, and people that have been making hash for 2 or 3 years have came back to me and been like, holy fuck, you were right about that. And what that thing is you gotta grow fire ass weed. You gotta look at it like you're not farming the flower, you're farming the trichomes. We're trichome farmers when you're making hash. So
Absolutely.
that's why I was on that initial product stack. Like I said, I was putting everything into it that I thought would produce more trichomes or make them more stable.
Yeah. So just to
So
kind of go
Well,
back on some of the
and we didn't talk
takeaways
about
here.
we didn't talk about the most important thing of the
What's
whole
that?
process that we all learn is genetics matter more than anything else.
Oh, fire in, fire out.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're getting started, and it's not just necessarily fire in, fire out. It's like, especially these days, it's honestly easier today than it was in 2021.
Oh, hell yeah.
Um, and you know, props as hell to anybody that was making rosin back like 2012. Like, the genetics available that would be stable was so limited. Now there's, you can look them up and find them pretty quickly, but there's like 10 to 15 breeders that breed specifically for hash. So if you buy those packs of seeds, you're going to do well. I had a friend that grew like, I love growing marijuana seeds for like a whole year when he first started, just because he was like, they're cheap. He didn't trust in himself enough to invest 150 or $200 per pack of seeds. And then he realized, like, after taking a bunch of my cuts, he's like, man, dude, I've been taking clones and keeping and rerunning these shitty plants. Like,
Yeah.
so
To kick back, because you guys just been dumping a whole bunch of great knowledge here, I want to sort of recap on a couple of takeaways. So, Hashi, your process is you just maintain everything as cold as possible the entire time. Who gives a shit about what's going on in the environment? My shit's going to be cold and I'm going to be fast. I know my process. I know my steps. I've got everything lined up. Everything's ready. You do that very much mise en place, chef's trick where everything is there. It's ready to go. But Sonoma, you're sort of the flip side. You're more like me. You're gonna use your environment for your advantage. You're waiting until it gets cooler. You wash in that really nice cool environment where you have more luxury with maybe handling. You don't need to use maybe as much ice, but it's just you've got that environment to use for your advantage. Sound about right, Chance?
That's perfect. Yep.
Yeah.
And,
Well, let's. Oh, sorry.
and I think it's just the convenience is afforded by the environment, right? Like
Oh,
that's
for sure,
always
for sure. I mean, I live in Canada, right? It's next week. It's Hashin Day every week, man, because it's going to be hovering right around freezing all day long and all night long. So it's perfect for me.
yeah, I'm amped right now because my whole flower room is in at week 3 right now. So it's like
Ooh.
going into winter. I'm like, fuck yeah, these washes are all gonna go smooth. Like, I'm gonna be able to get the room down to like 55, 60 at least. So I just have like a room AC that exhausts outside at least, so I'm not adding heat back into the room. But obviously, if you're going to take the cold room route, you can get like a window AC unit, insulate your room, and get a cool bot for cheaper than a cool bot. There's
You don't need a cool bot. There's hacks that exist.
yeah, there's that, and you can do the like double rainbird setup, and that's a lot cheaper. So
Yeah, yeah. There's some great ones out there. But, I want to take the conversation a bit of a different route. I want
Sure.
to talk a little controversial. I want to talk about aging and curing and all the different ways people think we're fucking up our products. When in reality, we're transforming them into something more magnificent. I mean, Sonny, you do some really cool Jartec stuff. Hash, you put up that post about your 2 year cold cure and real cold cure in the freezer, not just sitting out on the cupboard or on the shelf. So, yeah, gents, why do you think aging, curing, whatever you want to call it, is so controversial around these different methods? And why do you like the ones that you do?
Well, just this, I think it runs counter to the idea of fresher is better, right?
Right.
Like it's like we're trying to preserve freshness, 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 freshness. And like that's what it's easy to understand. Like fresher food is better, right? Like, but the thing is, like, this is a product that's a living, breathing thing, right? And that experience of it being alive doesn't necessarily have to end when that plant's chopped down, right? That resin is still a living, breathing thing. So it can do other things. And so, like, hashish traditionally is when, you get temple balls, charas, all these different types of, processes of, heat and pressure applying to it, and isolating the trichome heads. That's the way it's been consumed for thousands of years. So I think there's something to be gained and honestly, terpenes to be gained. It's proven by science now at this point. Is that a hashinine, correct? I believe is that right, Ash?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, hashining is formed. And the only way you can get that terpene is through like the temple ball experience, through that actual resin curing.
Yeah, and myrcene and beta carotene
Yep.
are really common amongst all of those like eastern mountain regions where a lot of that flour comes from for like the Moroccan hash and stuff that was
Mhm.
tested in that study. Um, so I believe what's happening in that case is those more complex terpenes are having different bonds broken and becoming monoterpenes.
Yeah.
So it's not just hashinine, like that was one that they found, but there was also other monoterpenes that were in like higher concentration than normal. So in that case, the terpenes are acting as a solvent and breaking down wax and silica content. And like where people have told me, oh, nothing's happening. Like I've had people say, like, oh, fresh press is best. I've heard every different perspective. And my personal opinion at this point is aged cold cure, either at room temp or in the freezer. The temperature just changes time. That's all temperature does. Is I've left cold cure at room temp in a drawer for 3 months, and the color changed. It got darker, but it stayed wet because it was sealed well. If you have the right jars, Uline 1 ounce jars, um, Miron 5 milliliter jars are the best for your small jars. This has all been tested by Hashtag, I think. Um, and as long as you have the right jars and everything's sealed well and it's not getting light, because that's also going to affect things. Um, I store stuff in the freezer, I store stuff in the fridge, and I store stuff at room temp. And if it's something I'm smoking soon, then I do that. Sometimes I stress test when I'm pheno hunting and we'll throw a jar in my car during summer and stuff and like let something hit 90 degrees. Like I when I'm pheno hunting, I kind of abuse the hash after it's been cold cured, and that's like another judgment factor for
Mhm.
me. Um, but basically, uh, to your question of aging, I think the terpenes act as a solvent. So
Oh
one
yeah.
argument is you're not improving cold cure by letting it cure longer. Well, the main basis of that argument is that the amount of mass is being reduced, like there's evaporation happening. Well, just because it's losing something doesn't mean that it got worse. Like there's a high potential, in my opinion, that out of the spectrum of terpenes, some of them are great for our body and some of them are not. And uh, that could be different from person to person too. So it's so hard to say, but just from my personal experience, the stuff I've aged in the freezer burns cleaner and has more pronounced notes of the desirable factors. A huge hash head that I hang out with, I recently hung out with him. And I was like, yo, I'm not sharing this with other people because I only got like a couple grams of it. But I got this mountain trap that I made a year and a half ago that's been freezer aged. And I got this mountain trap from a fresh run. Try them back to back. And the mountain trap from a fresh run, which arguably I've gotten better at making hash over that period, super clean hash versus the aged stuff. The aged stuff had heavier citrus notes and burned cleaner in the banger. It was like water, and at the end of the dab, it was like nothing browned or anything, just like all clear.
So
So
do you think it's fair to say then that a good portion of the people, and I'm going to say a large portion, 80% plus, have never really tried a properly aged product?
100%, you can't
Yeah.
if you're buying it. Like it's
Uh,
only people
Very
who like.
fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I've had, at this point 2 year aged hash, temple stuff like that. And it's one little hit of like some really well aged hash Jesus, man, so different than just
much
like
more. You can
fresh.
almost get to a psychedelic experience with that.
Yeah. And
With
on this note right now of what you're saying, that's the number one thing for me of why I'm obsessive about this hobby is that level of control you take.
Right. Oh, of course.
I can
I think
age
that's
something.
why. Yeah.
I can make things that I cannot buy. Like I used to be into brewing beer, and that was my whole thing about that. It's like I'm gonna do some crazy shit. Like one time I made like a 9% ABV kiwi wit beer. And it was just like this
Dude.
fucking
I'm
ridiculous
in. I'm
shit.
in.
Yeah, I had to
Whew.
use 3 different types of yeast and extend the ferment and all kinds of crazy shit. And it was fucking no one's gonna sell this because it's not profitable. But it's something I thought about and wanted to try after I
Your
got
equivalent
really
of a
into the hobby.
1% yielder, not on a haze.
Yeah, exactly. Like no brewery's gonna be like, all right, 4,000 pounds of kiwi. All right.
Go.
Nice. Okay, so then, same question though. Kicking it back over to you, Sonny. Talking about manipulating the product. You do what are you, jam tech, jar tech. You're taking stuff and doing stuff in jars to manipulate the product. Just talk to that.
Oh yeah. So one of the things that I've had a lot of fun with is heat curing. So I was fortunate enough I took a course with Brett Bird and the guy Hesbro, if you guys are familiar with him, as a hash maker here in Northern California. Makes these really amazing jams, and he actually walked through his process of making them. And so over the last couple of years, I've been having fun kind of tweaking that technique and trying different implements and different equipment and but honestly trying to keep it pretty low fidelity for and not invest too heavily in equipment to do it. And honestly getting some pretty spectacular results these days on the jam front. And the way that I do it is it's pretty simple, and you're done in 3 hours versus days on the heat mat. And I mean I put it out there that I think it stacks up pretty darn well, the heat, the quick process. But I love it. That's taking it and transforming it into something new. That process of taking something and it's like, okay, now I can like apply it. And like it adds a little bit of artistry to it versus like you get to the cold cure state, the whole objective is like, okay, just don't do anything to screw up nature. Like just try not to screw it up, right? Like don't screw up the heads, don't screw up the resin, don't screw it up, don't screw it up, don't screw it up. And then you get to this point where it's like, okay, now let's screw it up a little bit.
Yes,
I think
there's something. See what
there's
happens.
something
Yeah.
about that
Dude,
makes me
it's
happy.
so funny that you say that because I feel that way entirely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the first time washing. You've spent months growing, caring for these plants. You took them down, you've harvested them. Perhaps you've gone through the entire point of drying them, like you were saying, Hash. Do a cured product your first time, and then you're going to take the buds and put them in water. How unnatural does that feel?
Oh, I know. It's
So,
an alien feeling the first time through, but
right.
for the first time if I see a real puddle of actual trichomes, it's like sitting in the bag, a real puddle of them. It makes it worth it because that
Dude,
that that high right there. Oh,
I remember the first time my dad came over while I was washing because we used to brew beer together. I was like, come check this out. It's a lot like brewing beer. Like, I'm just gonna be hanging out in the garage for a few hours. It was like middle of winter, so I had cold temps out there. He came over and I loaded like 700 grams into the wash machine. He was just like, you're just gonna put that in ice water? Like him having the like lifetime of he's only had access to like super fire weed for 1/3 of his smoking life. So it's like he's smoked weed his whole life, and he's just like, what?
Why would you do that? All right. Well, guys, let's start wrapping her up here, even though I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. Um, the Discord. I want to circle back to the Discord. How do people get on this Discord? The Homegrown Hashishin Society Discord. If what do they do for an invite?
So many different members can invite if you ever see somebody posting about something on Instagram or Reddit or anything like that. Anybody's allowed to invite. I used to have it public. I quit that because I was getting a ton of people just
Yeah.
joining to enter the
Yeah.
giveaways and like not participating on the server. So you can check out my Instagram. It's don't worry
Link down below.
underscore be hashy. That is primarily where people get in. I have a link tree, and it's kind of a funny thing where I intentionally have a broken link there because I want people to message me and be like, "Hey, I'm trying to get into the Discord." So it's kind of a just additional barrier, and most people are like, "Oh, this is broken." I'm like, "Yeah, I know," but I
Quality,
looked at your
not quantity.
profile and you're in. so, um, so yeah, come to me, come to Sunny,
Yep.
come to anybody talking about the Discord that you see.
Yeah, you can reach out to me, guys. I'm on there too, joining up on Sunday nights primarily. Quick shout out to our boy Ironic for running the show on there, and some really good
Absolutely.
questions.
Shout out to him, man. He's been a great addition to the Discord.
Yeah, and you guys are doing lots of cool stuff over there. There's pheno hunts going on. I believe there's some talk about a big meetup next year. Maybe you want to touch on that a little?
It's up in the air. Me and Sunny need to talk more about it, but I got some updated plans that I don't want to say here because I haven't told him about them. So I'm not gonna
I
promise
think I've
anything.
heard
But
third person about those, but yeah, we should probably table that one
yeah,
for
Yeah.
but
yeah.
yeah, we're thinking about doing something. Don't worry, be hashy community cup. I'll probably have the first one still carry my brand just because it's all my buddies. But after that, it's definitely the Homegrown Hashishin Society at this point. I mean, I think we're gonna be growing beyond 1,000 members, and I
Oh,
mean, at the end
certainly.
of the day, that's what it is it's a society for hash makers, for everybody to ask questions and learn and teach and just share the passion for it. I have had so many people reach out to me and be like, "Man, this is like so refreshing because so much of the internet is packed with negativity." And part of why we have the mod team is it's in the rules. When people join, it's like we're not dealing with any negative attitudes. Like you can't be a dick, because I've seen it multiple times. It changes the whole vibe of the server. Like if you've ever been at
Oh,
a
so
party
much.
and somebody's being a dick, it changes the vibe of the party. So it's like, dude, we're all here to fucking hash out with each other and have a good time. So I'm not afraid to boot people, and the mod team basically just votes on stuff based on how people have interacted. We usually give people a couple chances, but uh, yeah, don't join if you're a Redditor that just wants to come talk shit. Do that, do that on Reddit.
Oh, that's the
But if
worst
you're
place to go
tired of
first.
all the
There's
people
no
talking shit
asshole
on
Yeah.
Reddit and
policy.
you love hash and you're trying to get better, then that's
Uh,
the place for you.
I mean, guys, I'll say it here, to be blunt. I love Hashin, and I'm passionate about it. These guys are fucking nuts. Okay, so go check out the Discord. Reach out to Hashi on Instagram or so. Like I say, links down below. And last thing I want to talk about, of course, the podcast. Where do we find it, guys? Upcoming episodes. Anything you want to plug on there? And that Brian Tist episode, solid. I had him on the show too. Fucking awesome, dude, man. Love that
Yeah,
guy.
dude,
But
he
cool.
is such an amazing person for the space.
Yeah.
He's always pushing boundaries. Um, yeah, you can listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Unfortunately, we're not on YouTube, but I'll get there. We'll eventually be down to show our faces, I imagine. But
Yeah, at
right
some point.
now, we like the anonymity. So
Oh,
um,
absolutely.
but yeah, it's out there. Just look up Homegrown Hashishin and it'll pop up.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
and we're gonna have some merch coming out soon. So
oh,
that's
Oh
gonna be
yeah,
nice.
yeah. We got the
yeah,
website up
yeah.
and
Hats,
we got
Yeah, homegrown Hashishin.
t-shirts.
Yeah, yeah. Go to the website and check us out.
All right.
yeah, Sonny
Well, we'll
made
do a
some
full list
dope
of links
ass
below, guys.
hats, and we got some moo
Huge big
mats.
hats. Yeah, like, they're like 12 by 8s. They're awesome, and they're like just rocking. So
Yeah,
they're really limited edition. Get them out, get them while you can. But yeah, those should
yeah.
be up there. And then you were talking about future episodes. I think that we've got a bunch of good ones coming up. But the Brett Bird one was really fantastic. I really enjoyed that one. We got into a whole discussion about full spec, and I think a bunch of things that we all agreed on. But you want to hear someone get passionate about hash, that guy gets will get fired up.
Yeah,
It's
we that one's gonna be a fun one because we get into temple balls and
yeah.
cured bubble hash, and that's something a lot of people aren't talking about that a lot of people should know about. I feel like.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. We'll have to do another episode here. I could talk to you guys for days, because I think we all share the same passion. That's for making great hash, great concentrates.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
100%.
All
Yeah,
right.
thank you, man. This was great.
So, guys, links below. Check out all this stuff. Again, if you have trouble getting to the Discord or something, reach out to me. I can help you out in that regard. Otherwise, the Homegrown Hashishin Podcast and Society, Don't Worry Be Hashy, and Sonoma Sun Grown. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Keep it hashing.
Absolutely.
All right, we out.